Live, live? Oh, yay, I can see myself. There I am. Good morning, everybody. Hello. How are you all doing today? All right, let's shut that down because I'm going to get an echo up in here. How's everybody doing today? Welcome, you guys, to my video, our video, on piecing problems. How many of you get frustrated over different aspects of piecing? All of us, right? All of us in quilting. So we sent out a survey the other day and we asked you what your biggest concerns were specific to piecing. Last week we did another survey and asked you what area of quilting gave you the most trouble, and we did a video on those topics last week, so you can go back and have a look for that video. We covered what did we cover? Fabric selection, that was a big one. Accurate sewing, or no, was it yeah, we talked about seam guides, and we talked about something else too. It's definitely worth checking out. Go look at that video from last Friday. This Friday, we're going to talk about problems specific to piecing. So when we surveyed our audience, the two biggest answers were people are concerned about bias edges. Anytime that we're working, say, with triangles or something that's cut on the diagonal, that is a concern for people. And another issue for people is achieving the scant quarter inch. What is it? What does that mean? How do I get it? Those kind of things. So today I thought I would do a little video and just give you some tips, give you a little taste of what I offer when I do my challenges and my Learn to Quilt class. Maybe you haven't heard of those before, but I do these 7 and 14-day challenges where we piece a project over a compressed period of time, or at least I release the content over that compressed period of time, and quilters follow along and participate, and what they are finding is that their skills are improving dramatically. I can't believe all the messages I'm getting thanking me for the tips and tricks that I'm showing people in my challenges and in my Learn to Quilt Masterclass, because they're already seeing drastic improvements. So that makes me really happy, and that makes me want to share this with more quilters, because what is more frustrating than spending all that money on beautiful fabrics we love and then finding that our project doesn't turn out the way we hoped it would? That is frustrating, that's disappointing, and I want that to stop happening to you, because I found ways to make that stop happening to me. You know, I can relate to those days of I can't afford fabric. Well, now I have a quilt shop, right? So I seem to have fabric coming out the you know what. But back in the days when I really had to save my pennies to pay for that precious fabric, it was hard to justify cutting it up because I knew something was going to go wrong. So I want to show you little things that can help you. Now, does everybody know what bias is? I'm sure if you're one of the ones who expressed a concern over bias, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but maybe you haven't encountered piecing triangles with a bias edge yet. There's all different methods for piecing triangles, all kinds of tips and tricks for doing it. I still like to cut out my triangles and piece them the good old-fashioned simple way. I find I get the best results when I cut my true triangles the proper size, and I find I'm faster as well. One way of piecing triangles is to take two squares and put them face to face, mark a line down the center of one, and stitch on either side of that line a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That method can be really great because we cut our squares a bit big and then we trim everything down to the exact size we need. I don't like that method because it slows me down. It's an extra step. Now I have to cut those things apart and I have to trim them down to size. And I can see that pile of little shreds, like I'm literally cutting off a hair off all 4 sides of that piece when I trim it up, but I can see the waste as well, and I don't like that either. I still find that when I just cut 2 good old-fashioned triangles and sew them together, I am going to get the best results. So I am always cutting on the 1/8, and a lot of people are scared of that too, but it's really not that hard once you get used to doing it. And that's the benefit of my challenges, because we do a lot of repetition. I have you do same thing over and over and over again, and that's what makes you get good at it. So in my upcoming challenge, one of them is called Head to the Mountains Quilt. And that one starts in September, I believe. The whole quilt is triangles, 100% triangles. And here's the thing, I am not telling you that you can only do things my way. I'm going to show you different methods and let you pick what works best for you. Maybe you've got more patience than me. Maybe you're more willing to take the time to do those half square triangles the other way I described, using 2 squares. We're all different. And we all have to find a way that works for us. So, like I said, that is the benefit of participating in one of my challenges, is I'm going to give you so many different options, and you get to pick and choose what works best for you. So let's talk about just bias, what it is, how it works, why it's a problem. When we take a square of fabric and we cut it on the diagonal, we create 2 equal triangles, right? 2 right angle triangles. This edge on the inside here is the 45-degree angle where the fibers of the fabric meet. Fabric is created through weaving, right? So we've got grains of thread going this way, and we've got them going this way as well. So we're creating a weave. And when we cut that weave on a 45-degree angle, we leave delicate fibers at the edge that are very fragile and can easily come unwoven. So when I take a triangle and when I purposely stretch it, it literally just comes apart. But what's a good thing about bias is that it's very malleable. We can shape it. Lots of people use bias strips when they're doing applique because they can create wavy lines. They can do lots of great things with bias, but it requires special handling when we're piecing it with our domestic sewing machines. That delicate, fragile edge, and you can see where I distorted it, where I've stretched it, it's never going to go back to normal. It's kind of ruined now. So that's why we have to be extra careful with bias, because it is so very delicate. Now what I'm proposing to you is we take this delicate edge and we sew it on our sewing machine, and we let those little grippy feed dogs chew it up from the underside. So one way to avoid that, if you're piecing a triangle to a square or a rectangle or something like that, put the piece on the bottom against the feed dogs that is not bias. And that is going to protect your bias edge a little bit by keeping it away from the feed dogs. Now there's going to be lots and lots of times when you have to sew 2 triangles together and we are dealing with 2 delicate edges. We cannot avoid using those feed dogs on those edges, can we? So one tip that I give all of my students is to slow down your machine. Just slow down the speed on your machine. Most machines these days come with a little slider kind of in the middle of the machine, and you can slide it right to left. You usually bump it right down if you're teaching someone how to sew or you got a wee one. When you are dealing with delicate edges like that, I want you to turn that speed right down. You're going to be surprised how much better your triangles look after you sew them at a slower speed. All right. So, like I said, the Head to the Mountains challenge is only 7 days, and it is coming up on September the 9th. But it is all triangles, and we've got setting triangles around the borders as well. So you're going to get loads and loads of experience and practice working with bias edges, which is going to make you a master at bias. I promise. Now I want to talk with you a little bit about the scant 1/4 inch. It is so elusive sometimes, but you know what? It just takes a little bit of experimentation to get it. Yesterday I sewed up a couple of samples here with my machine, and I'm going to tell you about the results of those here. The first one I sewed, I took 3 strips, each 2 inches wide, and I sewed them together, and for this first experiment I used my 1/4 inch foot on my machine. Just sewed along the side of it, didn't do any other fussing around, just the straight 1/4 inch as recommended by my machine manufacturer. So my 1/4 inch was excellent. It measures 1/4 inch, but when I measured the width of this piece, it should have been 5 inches. And the reality is that it came out just under. So I'm going to line it up at the 10-inch mark. And when I line up to the 15, I'm just shy of it, like a fingernail. Not quite the 1/8. I would describe this as a 16th. And when I look at that, I think, that's not so bad, right? It'll be okay. As long as all my pieces are the same, that's fine. But when I go fitting this into my quilt and up against another piece that should also be 5 inches, there's going to be a little bit of compromise there. Things aren't going to fit quite properly. So I'm kind of shorting myself a little bit here. And if I short myself a 1/16 of an inch over the width of a queen size quilt, I'm going to end up shorting myself a couple of inches in the long run. It's literally going to add up that much. It seems negligible, but it truly isn't. So then I took my ideal seam guides, and that is like a little, it's like a little barrier. It's a little ruler, and I glue it onto my machine. It's got sticky stuff on the back, so it stays on my machine very nicely. And I do all my sewing right up against it. It's like a little wall. I can't pass it. So I measured out my scant 1/4 inch using my ideal seam gauge, and that tells me exactly where I need to place my ruler. And you know what? It was skinnier than my 1/4 inch foot measured. Of course it was. I'm after a scant 1/4 inch. Scant means less than. So I sewed my 3 strips again. These, each 2 inches wide, sewn with a scant 1/4 inch. And when I measure this one, I'm exactly 5 inches. Exactly. So that made me happy. But what I want you to remember is it's fine to measure out your scant 1/4 inch, but then you have to test it. You have to take the time to sew some scraps and make sure they turn out the size you expect them to. Okay, so it's worth it to do these little experiments. Now this next one that I did might surprise you a little bit. I do all my sewing with a 50 weight Aurifil cotton. That takes up very little room when I open up my seam. So when I sew it, you know, it's like that. And when I open it up, you need to remember that your thread is actually taking up room inside that fold. So for this 3rd experiment, I still used 2-inch strips, but this time I switched to a thicker thread. And I used one called Medley. It's a Tex 40. And I used black so that hopefully you can actually really see it. So I sewed my 3 strips, and I pressed, and I came out an 1/8 of an inch shorter using my scant 1/4 inch. So I still took the time to measure with my ruler, and when I did it with my 50 weight thread, I got exactly what I was expecting. All I did was change the weight of my thread. I used a fatter, thicker thread, and I shorted myself an 1/8 of an inch. That is shocking. Isn't it? I was so surprised. So that is why many of the students in my Learn to Quilt class are so grateful that I'm teaching them even the weight of thread that I use, even the weight of needles that I use. Everything that I do along every single step of the way, my students are learning in my Learn to Quilt class. And that class runs over 6 weeks long. So, you know, in my challenges, I give you a great overview. You learn lots and lots and lots. But in Learn to Quilt, it is start to finish, from picking fabrics all the way to binding that quilt. 100% of the information that you are going to need to be successful at quilting. But if you are looking for something that's maybe just a little bit more of a challenge, a bit of a skill builder, then my challenges are going to be great for you. And I have 2 that are coming up. One on September the 9th. It's called Mountain Challenge, Head for the Mountains Quilt Challenge. And that one is 7 days long. And remember what I told you, it's all triangles. I should have had that quilt hanging behind me. What was I thinking? My other challenge is my 14-day ombre challenge, and that one is going to focus on color. How to select colors, Look, there'll be tons and tons of piecing skills and skill building in that one as well. But the color was something that I felt was left out of one of my previous challenges. So we've decided to focus on that in the ombre challenge. And we are going to make a luminous, beautiful quilt. There's 2 different size options as well, a lap and a queen. So the links for all 3 of my programs are going to be in this video description, right? So my Learn to Quilt Masterclass will be there. My Head to the Mountain Challenge quilt will be there, as will my Ombre Challenge quilt will be there. And if you want to join me in any of that fun, you are more than welcome. So the challenges are kind of unique. I'm literally teaching you a quilt class inside a Facebook group. And I upload all the patterns into that group, and I teach a video every day of the challenge. And we go over all kinds of skills. Oh, yay! You're awesome. This is our mountain quilt. Thanks, Maddie. Okay. All right. So this is the mountain quilt. And this one has been really crazy popular, this pattern. You can see I used 1 fabric line. And what did I have? A layer cake maybe and a bunch of 10-inch strips. And I just gradiated my fabrics right through, from dark, through mediums, up through lights. And when I laid it out, it just made this awesome mountain effect. You can see we're going to get lots of practice with bias. We've got small triangles, large triangles, and then we've also got our setting triangles around the outer edge. So we are going to deal not only with half square triangles, but these are quarter square triangles. You're like, what are you talking about? Awesome. Thanks, Elle. Let's fold it and we'll put it, yeah. Love it. All right, so I guess a few of you joined kind of late, so let's talk a bit more about bias again and why you might want to learn more about it and how to handle it.
Thank you.
You're so welcome, thank you. So bias is it's got such a bad reputation. When we cut a square in half, we are left with the fragile inside diagonal edge. And what happens there is that it can come undone. And it literally just falls apart, you know, when I abuse it, of course. But bias is amazing. Bias is used like in garments so frequently because it creates a really drapey, form-fitting type of look. And I learned a lot about bias. I took an online garment making class one time. I can't make garments because the class was online. There was no teacher to like submit your garment to. But I guess that's the benefit of interacting with me in the Facebook group, is because I'm right there answering your questions in the live videos. You are posting your progress in the group. I am commenting and telling you, look, I can see right here what went wrong, and I'm giving you feedback and advice. And that is what's so great about taking a class with a live teacher, is because you're getting that feedback you need so that you can make the improvements you need, right? Unfortunately, that garment class was not beneficial for me because there was no interaction with the instructor. You were given information to study out of a textbook and left to your own devices. Yes, great.
What size of thread do you use?
And what size of thread do I use? I use a 50 weight cotton. I use Aurifil. That's my favorite thread for piecing. I get asked a lot too, like I talk about glide thread a lot in my long arming videos and stuff like that. I use glide for the top stitching or the quilting that goes over top of the quilt. I always like to try and clarify that because I'm always promoting glide, and then I tell my piecers that I use Aurifil. So each thread is equally awesome, but it each has its own unique place in the quilting process, in my opinion. All right, so bias. Let's get back to bias again. When we take a square and we cut it on the diagonal, we are left with those 2 bias edges. That bias is very delicate. It requires careful handling. Somebody suggested to me the other day in one of my videos that you could apply a light layer of starch to all your bias edges, and that will firm them up a little bit and make them stiffer and less likely to fall apart, right? I thought that was a really great suggestion. I'm not a pre-washer of fabrics, so I don't overstarch my stuff because that causes shrinkage while we're going. And if you don't pre-wash your fabrics and then you get shrinking halfway, stuff isn't going to fit together, right? So I would only suggest applying starch on your bias edges if you have pre-washed your fabrics. That would be the best case use of the starch in the bias. But when you participate in this challenge with me, you are going to make so many half square triangles. And like I said, I'm going to show you a couple of different methods so you can decide what works best for you. And then you get to make this really great quilt, right? We have some wonderful examples of this quilt in our Sparrow Quilt Co. daily group on Facebook as well. A lady recently shared hers. Oh my goodness, the colors she used were so beautiful. Her son or daughter was getting married in the mountains, and so she made this quilt for the wedding and gave it to them, and it turned out so beautiful. So I hope you'll check out those options if you're not sure just yet, but it's a great quilt, and it looks really challenging because everything's set on point, but when you look at it, it's not all that hard. And don't worry, I'm going to walk you through every step of it in our challenge. But if you are someone that struggles with seam allowance, then any of my challenges are going to be good for you as well, because we go over it over and over and over again. We talk about it constantly. It is funny because I'll do silly things like start sewing here at work, and then I'll go home and start sewing again on a different machine. Guess what? My seam allowance is different on each machine. I can measure out my scant 1/4 inch and be really particular, but if I get thoughtless and forget and start sewing on that other machine, suddenly now I've got blocks that are this size from this machine and a different size from the other machine. So that is another thing that's really important when you are trying to achieve that scant 1/4 inch or just accurate sewing. Make sure you're using the same machine with the same seam allowance consistently, and that is going to continue giving you the great results that you need. All right, was there any other questions at all? Good. All right, well, I would like to invite you to ask any questions if you've got any. Either about bias or scant 1/4 inch or any of my challenges. The ombre challenge is going to be a mystery, so I have not revealed the final pictures yet, but we did a mystery quilt a couple of months ago as a challenge, and oh my goodness, the interest was amazing. People were asking for more mystery quilts, so that is an option in the ombre 14-day quilt challenge. And we are going to talk more about color in that challenge because I felt like that was missing a little bit out of the first challenge. And surprisingly, that is a really, really big problem for quilters. They struggle with selecting colors, selecting fabrics, that kind of thing. So why not include that in a challenge so that people can improve that skill as well? All right, well, is there anything else that I need to go over? We're good? Okay. Well, I hope I've convinced you into joining me in one of my challenges or classes. You can find the links in this video description, and I really hope to see you in my private Facebook. It's going to feel like, in my private Facebook group, it's going to feel like I'm right at your side, giving you feedback, offering you tips and tricks. That is my goal. I want you to feel like you're in the room with me. And if you've followed along with any of our videos prior, you'll know, just how much I enjoy teaching and how much I enjoy quilting. And it's just a really fun thing. So let's do it together. Sound good? I hope to see you in one of my challenges or classes, guys. Thanks for watching today. I'm going to let you go for now so I can get ready for teaching my Learn to Quilt Masterclass. Where is the challenge pattern? So this pattern, Head to the Mountains, the quilt pattern is for sale on the website at sparrowquiltco.com. If you want to participate in the challenge itself, you can find the link for that in this video description. I'm pointing at Landon's computer as if that helps you in some way. All right, you have the controls over there, my dear. Thanks for watching, everybody.